Hello pagans, welcome to my garden. I'm Chameleon Jackson, and today we're talking about mental health. This is something I'm going to call something along the lines of Mental Health Mondays. Not going to be a regular thing, but it'll be something I'll try to do quite regularly, especially if people get involved and want to talk about this sort of thing. I'm going to come up with a different name probably than Mental Health Mondays because, it sounds quite cliched. Now, as I said, I'm going to be showing you around my Animal Crossing island while we're here as well, so I thought it'd be a nice little background thing to have on for everyone to watch rather than just have somebody stare at you down a camera and talk about themselves for an hour. I really want people to get an idea of who I am and understand why I've started this channel, why I am the way I am, in effect. Some people might say that I'm just trying to get ahead of things, ahead of, like accusations and things like that by doing this. Technically, you could say that is true. But at the same time, I feel like honesty is something I should have with this channel if I'm going to be putting myself out there and talking about topics that affect people on the everyday. Then I should be honest about who I am as well, and that gives you then the decision to decide if you want to hear it from me. I've alluded, I think, on Blue Sky that perhaps people would feel a bit less comfortable with what I would have to say based on my my history, but the only way to really know that is to go through. I'm going to put it out there right now as well. This is actually the fourth time I've tried recording this. The first time I started recording, there was a problem with the connection into the. Let me get this right. The first time I tried recording, I recorded for around an hour and 15 minutes. It was the whole thing, my whole life story, start to finish. How I am, where I've been, where I want to be in the future. And then I looked down at the computer and I hadn't pressed record. So I'd spent an hour just not recording. The second time, there was an issue with the connection between the microphone and the mic. Luckily, that was only 20 minutes or so. It wasn't very long. And I realised into there then that actually I wasn't recording anything, so I stepped away. I thought I'll come back to this. I've got the footage to use with it. I'll just talk over the top of it as a separate thing. Third time, everything was perfect. You'd say that, this is exactly how I want this recording to be. The mics were all wired up. Connections were perfect. I pressed record. I spoke for about 45 minutes before realizing that the problem was that my mic actually ran out of battery 3 or 4 minutes in. I gotta say, this is going to be terrible for the rest of the world because I said some really things that will be life-changing for many generations to come, but unfortunately that's lost to time. I need to preface this whole thing now that we've gone through that my channel is supposed to be a family-friendly channel, and I will maintain that the aim is to be as family-friendly as I can. I'm looking at recording sort of, what would I say? Legends, myths, things like that. Things that are important in the witchcraft community. I would very much say that they're not 100% accessible to young children, so I'm recording them in a way that I'm trying to turn into a more fairy tale sort of element, and that is specifically so you can enjoy the channel with your children if you've got any. If you're a pagan family, I understand entirely how your community might not have access to these things for you. I mean, a lot of witchcraft that I see online is very much aimed at adults getting into it, and one of the things that I'm trying to combat is, and don't get me wrong, there's no shame being thrown at them, but witch talk, which is very much trendy teenagers saying things that are not necessarily true. Yes, it brings witches into the forefront of our minds, but it's very much silly child games, the Ouija board being, this terribly demonic thing. Things are totally not true. So I would like to preface that yes, this channel is intended to be for children, no, not for children, for families, and your children are welcome to be part of these conversations. And I actually hope that could be a thing. It's a community, and a community is everyone inside that community. That's you, your parents, your grandparents, your children, your grandchildren. If they're part of the community and they have an understanding of the craft itself and the implications of those things, then they're more than welcome. And I can dumb things down for people if they need to, if they feel like I'm talking in a way that needs to be brought down for younger people to understand. I can do that for you. That's fine. But this particular video is dealing entirely with me, and I want everyone to know that there's nothing that is going to be explicitly bad. There is nothing of an adult nature in regards to sort of relationships and things like that, but there will be talks of depression and there will be talks of substance abuse, and I very much want to put that forward early. I think an older teen might be able to handle that conversation. If you just happen to pick this up and think, oh yeah, actually it's something we can watch together because he's said, he's family friendly, or maybe you've picked this up later and I've put out a couple of my myth and legend stories aimed at younger people, and you think, well, actually let's find a bit more about him. This might not be the place for those younger people. I don't know how my channel's going to go, but I'm planning in advance that, if things did take off a little bit, which would be lovely, I'd be quite glad if you would subscribe and like and talk to me down in the comments and do all the good stuff. Those things apparently help channels get into the algorithm much easier. If you did all that and the channel took off a little bit, I got a bit of a few followers that would push me into the algorithm. I need you to know that if you're a parent who's listening to this with their child, maybe listen to it first yourself and then come back to it, or just don't have children in the room. Now I will put a little bit of a preface before those parts, just so you know. There is something that I realistically think I should speak about, but I'm not going to because that is intensely personal to me. It might come up later at a different time, but it is worth bearing in mind. It's something that there is an event not mentioned here from when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, which I think does have a bearing, but it's a bit more personal than the rest. So it's worth saying as well that mental health is a subjective thing in some ways, and you may disagree with my takes here altogether. That's totally fine. I mean, it's healthy to disagree. If you do, please don't come at me in comments and this and that. I'm not trying to change anyone's minds. I'm not trying to trauma dump. Preferably, I would like people to not do the same. I wouldn't like people to trauma dump on me. I mean, I've talked, get part of the conversation, and yeah, that's fine. But it'll be something that I'd rather build up to rather than just say, look, I've put out this video. Please tell me all about the things that have happened to you. If we're going to do that, I'd rather do it in a sensible way where we communicate and we tell your story correctly. We tell your side of the story. But if you disagree with what I have to say, my beliefs on mental health, by all means, tell me that. That's fine, and correct me if you like, but do so in a respectful manner. Challenge the idea, not the person, and that's totally fine. So I'm going to go way back, talking about my life. I was born in the town of Caerphilly in Wales. I say town, I think it's a city. I was born there anyway, nice castle there. We have our own cheese. It's worth looking at. The cheese is lovely. The cheese is really nice. It's one of those like dry crumbly cheeses. You couldn't melt it, but it is really good. We've got a really nice castle. Famously, Tom Jones came from Caerphilly. I do apologise. My great nan lived next to him in their childhood. In her childhood. And they went to school together. I'm trying to think of other things that are famous from Caerphilly. I think Tommy Cooper is the big one, really. Yeah, Tommy Cooper. He's our big guy, and the castle. Of course, we've got some sites there, and yeah, it's a nice town to look into. If you're ever finding yourself in South Wales, if you're finding yourself around Cardiff, Caerphilly is about, I would say, 15 miles from there, and it's a nice place to spend a couple of hours if you've got time. Maybe you'd come down for a rugby match, and you've got some time outside of the rugby. Yeah, definitely go and have a look at Caerphilly. It's nice. I was born in Caerphilly. Sorry, this is entirely unscripted as well. I should have said that at the start. This is unscripted, so I'm just going off my head with things. And in terms of my sort of less mundane parts, more magical parts of my life, I was born to a synchronicity almost immediately. So I don't know how maternity care worked back in the 80s, but it seems that my mother was in hospital prior to going into labour with me. And she met another woman who was also in hospital with her. We were due to be born on the same day. The woman my mother met had her baby fine, and then I went into labour. My mother went into labour, sorry, I didn't go into labour. That would be a bit weird, even now, considering, I don't have the bits for that. But I went into labour very late at night. And I had that thing where you choke on your own umbilical cord in labour. And as a result, I was a C-section, but I had also suffocated. So I was revived, and my birthday is registered as having been the next day. Now, because of the whole situation, my mother was kept in hospital for longer, and because of the C-section, my knowledge of C-sections is very, very modern. So I don't know how it really worked back then in terms of the aftercare. But my mother got to see this other woman for a little bit more, and then theoretically she would never have seen her again. I'm going to put a little bit of trivia out, by the way. Whilst my mother was in labour with me, or whilst she was having her C-section, she was watching the film Alien, and specifically remembers the crew looking for the cat Jonesy, and picked up the nickname Jonesy for my entire life. The nickname Jonesy it's not my name, but it's a nickname that has stuck. But anyway, the woman. You would think this would be it. You know, Caerphilly is a fairly large place. I don't know the population at the time, but it is a pretty big place. It's not the sort of place where everyone knows everyone. I went to a nursery, or kindergarten as the Americans would call it. I think most places other than the UK call it kindergarten. But I went to a specific Welsh one where we learned to speak Welsh. And would you believe the first person I met at that kindergarten was technically the first peer I met in my life, the first baby I met in my life, which happened to be the little boy that was born to this woman next to my mother. I would call that a synchronicity if it's anything. You know, the first person of your age you meet is also the first person you meet when you go to school for the first time. And I think that has challenged my ideas on you know, what reality actually is. There has to be something a little bit bigger than just the idea of what you can see and what you can touch. And you will find shortly that I do have strong beliefs in what you can see and what you can touch. I am very much a person who's grounded in science, but I do believe in a little bit extra as well. Just because we can't explain it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I think that is one of the very first things that kind of pushed me down that route of, especially as a young boy, ghosts, more things like that sort of thing. And that then put me on from there. From there on in, I went to a Welsh primary school. I don't know what you would call it. Like first grade and stuff like that. You know, when you're sort of 5 to 11 years old. I went to a school that was Welsh, and I learned to speak Welsh, but I really struggled with reading and writing in Welsh, or reading and writing in general. But you have to understand, my entire education was in Welsh at the time. And so when I say I struggled with reading and writing in Welsh, what I mean to say is my entire education was that way, so I considered that to be the only way at the time. And so I struggled with it. At about the age of... I could probably tell you the exact age. 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. 8-year-old. I'm going to say his name because he is a man who means such a great deal to me based on how I was treated as a child. But in education. Mr. Hughes. I don't know his first name. Absolute giant of a man. Huge. But always old. I don't know how to describe him any other way. He was a massive, massive man. Even to my small child body, he was gigantic. He looked huge to me. But he was old, balding, big grey beard, looked like Santa. always played Santa at the Christmas concerts and stuff like that. But those qualities in him, the age, I think, probably, but just a dedication to education and the care of young people, made him one of the most important people in my life in terms of education. So he noticed very quickly that I struggled with reading and writing, reading in particular. I just couldn't do it, but I was capable in other ways. So in terms of like learning things like, you know, basic mechanical skills, maths, basic sciences, I was sharp. I could do those things, and I could do them, you know, top of the class. But I couldn't write, and I couldn't read. And unfortunately, in science, you have to be able to read and write to do these things. I could design an experiment at that age. I just couldn't write it down to communicate that with people. And he noticed this, and he pushed for me to get tested for everything, really. The outcome was that I was dyslexic. Now, this didn't come from Mr. Jones. This came from an external excuse me. This came from an external tester. And unfortunately, learning to read or write in Welsh, if you're dyslexic, is very, very difficult. If you're familiar with the language, you would understand what I mean. But we have a lot of extra letters, should I say, like the sound, which is a CH, which is double L, which is double D. They're letters that don't exist outside of Welsh, is what I'm saying. But they bring a complexity to the language that just makes it nearly impossible to learn to read or write if it's your first the language you're being taught in. Unfortunately, Mr. Jones had no. Mr. Hughes had no. Sorry, Mr. Jones was the headmaster of the school. I'm talking about Mr. Hughes. He had no sway outside of his class. It's a primary school, you know. He sees you for a year, you move on to the next class, you learn something new. But he took the interest in me, and he very much pushed me to do the most with myself that I could in the time he had me in his class. And then even after that, you'd see him around the school and he would still give the encouragement. He would still push you. Look, you can't read or write, but you're useful in other ways. You're good in other ways. You can learn in other ways. You've got your own way of doing things. And he is everything I think a school teacher should be, especially at a young age with the children. They need that support. Even if they're the most gifted child in the world, if they can do everything straight away, every child needs to be supported and told that they can. And he provided that for me. He made me know that I am capable enough to be, to be learning. He told me that I can learn and that I should carry on trying. Unfortunately, that didn't follow through, and so when I reached 11 years old, I went to a Welsh secondary school, and it quickly became apparent that, again, I was capable, I could learn, but it doesn't fly when you're 11 years old. You can't read or write or tell the time. Just because you can speak another language, a second language, fluently, doesn't change that you can't read or write. You need to learn to read or write. And this was one of my first sort of real hits, if you get what I mean. It's disheartening to be told, actually, you are more than capable, but you're in the lowest grade because you just can't keep up with everyone without being able to read or write. But I did get help with that also. And this is a lady, Mrs. White, who I'm saying, Mr. Hughes, Mrs. White, they likely passed away a long time ago. They were in their 70s when I was 10. But they mattered that much to me. It needs to be said, I am speaking of these people with the utmost of respect. Anyway, Mrs. White, she took me away once an hour every day. I can actually remember the room itself, and she sat me down and she taught me every noise of every letter and how they fit together. She taught me how to read there and then. And fortunately, she put me on to Lord of the Rings. And Lord of the Rings was the first book I read. I read through Harry Potter, but that was easy after that. She opened me up to all these fantastic things, the stories, different worlds that we should enjoy. She opened that up to me. But I think the difference in me was already there. I was already different to everyone else. And I think that was the start of the problems. I later went on then to finish school. Everything went fine. I studied forensic science, criminology and criminal justice at university, got my degree in that. During that time, I moved out of my parents' home immediately. As soon as I turned 18, I moved out. I wanted to live on my own. I wanted to be my own person. During that time, I think alcohol was a bit of a thing, but you're young and stupid. I would never say I've been an alcoholic. I drank a lot, but no more than your average student. I had a job. I lived the student lifestyle. During that time, I met my wife, and we had a child whilst we were still in university, very, very young. I finished university, moved on, did a bit of work freelancing as a forensic scientist, and then at the age of 21, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Very, very late stage testicular cancer, and I would say that this is likely the first real impact on my mental health. So I was very much told that I'd gone on way too long with this cancer. I'd done nothing about it, and my odds of having a lung cancer to go alongside it would be fairly high. Very quickly, they had me in for surgery, removed the testicle, gave me my treatments. But that lung cancer was always sort of floating in the back. Fortunately, it never happened, but it is very, very difficult to be told you got cancer. Community around my father spent a lot of time telling me that it was some sort of divine judgment from God. If anyone ever tells you that, tell them to leave. It's not true. Anyone that gets cancer, there are things that will cause you to get cancer, but if you get cancer, you need support. You don't need someone telling you that God did it to you. If you smoke 60 a day and you get lung cancer, you didn't help yourself. But if you got lung cancer, you don't need to hear God did this to you as a punishment. This is a punishment. You need that support. And I think the lack of support there, and very much being an intimate cancer, testicular, it very much hit me hard. Being 21, you're stupid enough to think, I'm not a man without my testicle. And, oh, sorry, this is also where we should be talking about not letting younger people listen. But then I think also this is sort of a medical thing, so I'm not talking sort of inappropriately, I wouldn't have thought. But you feel like... Sorry, press the button then. For a lot of young men, there's the whole thing of like your manhood is directly related to those parts. And anyone younger that is listening, that's simply not true. A man, a real man, isn't your Andrew Tates or your Elon Musks. A man is somebody that will look at the people around them, regardless of their own background, and will lift those people up to be better than they can. There is no direct correlation between your body parts, your gender identity, or the body you were born in has no bearing on it, or how your body is now. The makings of a man are who you choose to be. Do not be fooled by people that will tell you otherwise. Those people will hold you down. They'll bring you down. They will ruin you for their own satisfaction and call themselves a man. That's not a man by any metric. So it is worth saying that as well. But at the time, you're young, you're stupid, you think this is the case. It's just one of those things. And I very much found it hard to talk about as a result of that. And I had to keep that all in on myself. All my treatments. Sorry, just having a drink there. All my treatments, I kept to myself. All my feelings, I kept to myself. And I couldn't really tell you the emotions, because the emotions are so different when you're in that frame of mind. Yeah, there's sadness. Anger is the main emotion, if I'm honest. But it's a different kind of anger. You can't point at anyone. You can't punch a wall with that sort of anger. I'm not telling you should punch a wall if you're angry, but you can't. There's no outlet for that sort of anger, other than to be open and honest and speak to people. And because I felt like I couldn't, I didn't. And again, this is part of this channel. Try not to trauma dump, but if you want to talk about these things, share your experiences and understand how other people are. This is what I'd like to do on these little, mental health videos. It's, I think it's easier to speak, even if you're speaking fairly anonymously. I understand I'm not speaking anonymously right now. You've seen my face. You're on my channel. You're on my video. But it's more anonymous to speak to the internet into a microphone than it is to speak directly to a person. But I got through it. I got over my cancer. I'm sorry, I'm drinking something fizzy now. It's making it really hard. I got over my cancer, and I decided I wanted to give something back. It seemed only reasonable, because the people that had helped me, the nurses, the doctors, everyone involved, were heroes beyond anything they know. Yes, I understand a surgeon is a surgeon. They've trained to do what they're doing. But you know what? A man coming in with a box of prosthetic parts and offering you to look at them and appraise them and choose which one you like and giving you recommendations like he's a car salesman. He doesn't need to do that. He could have thrown in wherever he thought was the best, the cheapest. He could have thrown in the cheapest. Could have put nothing in. But he came to me with such a demeanour that was beyond what you would have expected. The doctors that did the talking, the tests, everything, they don't have to be kind. There's no reason why a doctor needs to be kind. They're looking after your health. They got to get you better, and you can go. They don't have to be kind. But they were. The nurses. I mean, I'll just put it out there. I've got the experience of being a nurse myself. That's where we're going in a minute. The nurses do not get nearly enough credit for what they do. Not even half as much. Not quarter of it as much. And that's where my story goes from there. So I think at this point I was struggling mental health wise. But I felt like if I did something, if I gave back, I could repay that debt. And so I went on to study nursing. And I passed. I became a nurse. My dream was always to work in cancer healthcare, to give back, to give the people who were in my position what I needed, to have that person to talk to. Nursing is a very female dominated industry, and I don't think I saw a single male nurse during my cancer care. I must have done, but there are none that I think directly treated me. And there's this whole thing that, like, male perspective on male treatments would have been what I wanted. I never did get to do that. But I did become a nurse. I would say I was a good nurse. I think going to be people, if people that knew me then saw this, they will likely disagree. And I'll get to that momentarily, why. But my patients liked me. I liked doing things for my patients. I cared for my patients. Getting them better was my goal. But doing so in a way that looked after them holistically. That was always my view on it. But I will say I struggled with mental health. I struggled with my own mental health. You would see something bad happen, and the first thing that comes into your head is, well, actually, that could have been me. I could have been that person that is in that terrible condition. A couple of years into my career, I was driving to work, and a car decided to, destroy me. Flipped my car, smashed it up, flipped me onto my roof, and nearly killed me. I ended up with 3 spinal fractures and 2 concussions. I do apologise for it. I'm drinking something fizzy whilst I'm reading this, and I'm not reading it, recording this. I've recorded this too many times now. And I'll be honest, it doesn't get easier recording it more than once. Talking about it more than once. It doesn't get easier to talk about something you've never talked about publicly before. It doesn't get easier. I think it's just that burden you've got to carry, that this will always be who you are. But anyway, getting back to the car accident, yeah, so 2 concussions and 3 spinal fractures, broken shoulder and a dislocated shoulder in the other arm, a couple of broken fingers, but I lived. Unfortunately, fortunately, I cannot remember the accident. I think it very much might be that it's repressed. Every now and again I can get a flash of the noise. And I can remember little bits about the morning. It was raining heavily and I was under a flyover bridge being checked out by the paramedic crew. remember the paramedic crew were really nice, really good. But I can't remember the actual accident. They took me to the hospital, and for some reason I never had an x-ray on my head or back or a CT scan. I never had any of the checks done. They just weren't done. I wasn't a difficult patient. I just for some reason never got put through those tests. I was confused at the time, but I had 2 concussions at the time. 2 skull fractures at the time. And for some reason, it never got checked on the day. So I got sent home. My mother came to pick me up, I can remember, from the hospital maybe 6-7 hours later. And I got sent home with the whole, take some ibuprofen, take some paracetamol, the headache will go away. And the problem persisted for days until I ended up having to go back to the hospital, and then they did the x-ray on my head and found the concussion. And then a couple of weeks later I went back because of the immense pain in my back and barely being able to walk. And they found the spinal fractures and the broken shoulder. Barely, it was starting to heal, but barely anything to do from. And I got given some good painkillers at that point for the back and the shoulder. And I think this might be the start. I did mention substance abuse at the start, and this is where substance abuse comes into the story. So they don't give you very much of this medication, and it is very, very addictive a lot of the time. And because the wounds has already started healing beyond that point, they decided that leaving it be would probably be the best course of actions. Don't go messing about with the injuries now that they're healing. Unfortunately, that doesn't help me now. The pain never went away. It never once went away. And I'm getting older. The older I get, the more I feel the pain. And the only way to deal with the pain was to find things that would deal with the pain. And again, alcohol wasn't my choice. I wasn't out there finding intravenous drugs. Not once. I'd never taken any sort of hard drug, no heroin or anything like that. But I found access to some shady, I assume Indian or Mexican, I say pharmacies, but they're not pharmacies, are they? They're people selling drugs illegally, as it turns out. I'll be honest, I thought these things were legal at the time. So God knows where I was taken. But I was taking a lot of it. And it went from being when you got a bad back to being when you wake up in the morning and when you go to bed. And then from when you wake up in the morning to when you wake up in the morning, then in 2 hours time, then in 2 hours time, then 2 hours time, until you're doing it all the time. And I became an addict. And my addiction affected my professional life. That ended up with me making professional mistakes. There are accusations that were made that aren't true. I'm going to put it out there. There are things that were said that simply weren't true. But, if you're doing one thing badly wrong, defend her. You can't. No one's going to believe you at that point. And I lost everything. I lost my registration. I was struck off the register. I should probably mention this was during COVID as well. And likely I should mention that I was working COVID wards every day. Every waking hour I could work, I was on a COVID ward nursing, people who weren't going to make it, let's say. And that didn't help, because then you just want to sleep all the time. And how do you sleep? You take the drugs. And it cost me everything. Well, it cost me my professional career. I cannot work in any sort of responsible position anymore. Not legally allowed to. And this is where I say people might feel less inclined to like me after this, because I was responsible for people. And the only way I could cope was to cook my brain, in effect. Get myself out of there. Always in pain physically, always in pain mentally, and every person that you see makes that mental pain worse, is how I lived. And then I decided that ending it was the best route forward, because I just couldn't keep frying myself like that. Going to bed every night, crying until you fall asleep, waking up every morning, immediately crying. Driving to work, crying on the way. Going on break, sitting in the car crying. Not a fantastic way to live. And because I had dug this hole so deep, there wasn't a single person I could talk to about that either. But that is my fault. If I had come clean sooner to anyone, I think there could have been some sort of redemption, but I didn't take it. And that's my fault. I deserve it. And I own it now. I got no other choice but to own it. Shortly after this time, I woke up completely deafened. Oh, it's worth pointing out as well, if the sound quality isn't fantastic, let me know. Being deaf, it makes editing sounds impossible, basically. Without an editor, if somebody knows how to edit and is willing to help me with that, I cannot pay you. I'll put that forward now. I cannot pay you, but I would be grateful. I'll make you a loaf of bread. But then I lost my hearing entirely. And I think it was at that point when I started taking my mental health seriously. The belief is that I'd had some sort of stroke, which is what caused my hearing to go. I was sober enough at the time, so it's unlikely that it was caused by anything like that. Anything that I had done to myself, just bad luck. But it was at that point that I started thinking, it's when you realise you can't hear your children's voices, and you never will again. And that that feeling that people won't hear you is what you are doing all the time, what you have to do all the time. You realise how difficult it is for everyone else. How do I say this? Not being able to hear changes how you see the world entirely. It's just different. And suddenly you realize that communication is the most important thing. They're not listening to you. They can't hear you if you don't say it. And it was at that point that I started taking my mental health seriously. I had made multiple attempts on my life, and now was the time to get some professional help. And I did. And to this day, I take a tablet every morning to help me feel normal. And it works. I am more open about it. I don't think I have ever cried as much as when I cried when my daughter was born. I cried when my second daughter was born. But these were different tears. I cried for hours when I finally opened up to my wife about literal years of things that I had never spoken about. You know, the cancer, the pain, the deaths during COVID, including friends of mine. But it opened the gates, and when you emptied that dam of sadness, at least for a little while, you feel better because somebody else has seen what you were holding back, and you need to talk about that. And as for, you know, in terms of a magical way, all that pent up sadness doesn't help your spiritual life in the slightest. And when I finally let go of that sadness and anger, I could see the things that brought me joy again. You know, the natural world, nature, shoving a piece of, you know, making a cake and shoving it in the oven and waiting for it to come out cooked and taste terrible, but you made it yourself, so, you know, it's all good because you made it yourself. And my hope is that by doing this channel and carrying on pushing more into my craft and my beliefs as a green witch and a hedge witch, that I can get back to who I was before those bad things when I was a child. I think, don't take this the wrong way, children are stupid. They haven't learned yet. But children understand happiness. We put too much focus on careers and professionalism. Children don't worry about that, and they're happy. Adults are not. And I want to get back to having just a little bit of my childhood back. And it does mean talking about the hard things. As an adult, that does mean talking about the hard things and being honest. But you can be a child and have experience in life as well. And that's where I hope to be. A child who can be sensible. So that is me, and that is my background. And if you've stuck around for the whole thing, I hope you don't hate me. I hope you can understand my perspective, where I came from, why I did the things I did, and why I'm doing the things I'm doing. Frankly, if you can't, I don't care. I'm trying to I'm trying to fix things in a way I can. I can't fix most of what I did, but I can try. I can make amends by helping people in one way or the other. And I encourage people, if you need to talk to someone, put a comment below. If you can't talk to someone around you, put an anonymous comment below. I will respond. Someone will respond. Someone will help you. But do not forget that there are medical professionals out there. In the UK, there are the Samaritans. I will put a link to the phone number below. I think they've got a website. I thought they were only a phone number, if I'm honest. They won't speak back to you, but if you think about what I said about my about the opening the floodgates and letting everything pour out, they'll listen. They're not there to guide you through things. They're there to let you speak and express yourself. And whilst, being deaf is a bit difficult now to make a phone call, I highly recommend them to people in the UK. There's likely the same in the US. I'll try to find that. But you need to, if you're struggling with your mental health, you need to seek that help. The help won't come to you. This is something worth saying. Well, help won't come to you. You need to find your help for yourself, because it's such a personal thing. If people know that you're struggling, they're not likely to really, unless they know themselves how it feels, they're not going to intervene, because it's a scary topic. Who wants to bare their soul in front of somebody that they know very well? They may have known for years, or they may have only known for a couple of weeks. It's a hard thing to do. You need to find the help, whether that is help you've paid for or someone that you feel you can trust to speak to. You need to find it. But that does not mean you're alone, because the second you look, you will get help. You are never alone in the world at all. No one will ever be alone in the world. If you need help, you ask, and people will come and help you. They're not afraid once you've opened the door, but you need to open the door. So, with that, I think I'm going to sign off on this. I hope you've liked my island. I've done a little couple of cuts, I think, throughout this, probably to show you what the island is. But I hope to show you more. If you play Animal Crossing, give me access to your island, because the little islands that they give you with the Nook Miles, they're terrible. As I said, if you need help, just put something down below. Even if you've got a coda in some way, put it down below. I'll put links to people you can get help from below, and I'm not sure if it's in my channel name. My email address might be there. I am not a mental health professional. I was a medical nurse, but I am happy to speak with you. And if you want to share your experience, definitely get in touch with me. We can hash out the details so that it's done respectfully, and we can share your story and your experiences, which I think would be good for other people. I mean, I'm telling you a story which I think is a bit on the extreme level with my background, but it doesn't have to be that extreme even. So I am going to say that if you want to carry on the ritual, press the subscribe button. No, I did it wrong this time. If you want to carry on the ritual, press the like button. And if you want to keep the spirits happy, press the subscribe button. It was great having you here in my garden, and take care.